Hey guys, want to build a robot? So this video is going to be a little bit different. Now, a lot of you guys know I'm a full-time robotics teacher. So during the day, I'm helping students with electrical engineering and robotics projects, and it's a ton of fun. And so even though right now we're virtual, we're still able to create and learn. And thanks to some tools that are available now, it's actually surprisingly easy to work on these engineering projects, even if we're miles and miles away. And so I had some students request this video, and I thought this could be helpful to maybe people all around the world. And so this video is going to be all about how to create gears in Onshape. Now, I can't say enough good things about Onshape. I really love using Fusion 360, and there are a bunch of other amazing CAD programs out there. But having browser-based CAD that's available to everyone is so awesome. And so for this video, I'm going to be using Onshape, and we're going to cover creating gears, then how to use the Revolute constraint to animate those gears, and then how to create the gear relation to make two gears mesh together. It's really cool, and it's surprisingly easy, and it's a skill that I've been finding that I've been using really often. So whether that's making custom gears or making custom sprockets, I even have used it recently to try to create molds for custom silicone tracks. And I'm running some tests on that right now to see if that's a viable option. I thought it sounded like fun, so I've got some more square-shaped molds here for this silicone, and it's super fun. And so this is going to be a quick video just covering, like I said, creating gears, the Revolute constraint, and then creating the gear relation tool. All right, let's take a look. So one thing that I like about Onshape is that I haven't yet felt held back by it. I would argue that it's probably pretty comparable to Fusion 360. Now, it may not be quite as powerful as AutoCAD or SolidWorks, but it's definitely not. It's definitely not lacking. There's tons of awesome features in here. So whether that's modeling or animation or doing sectional cuts or creating drawings and stuff like that. And so today we're just going to focus on gears. And so I tell my students all the time that the very first step should be creating a sketch. So I'm going to create a sketch, and I usually sketch on the top plane. Right, that's just how I do it. It really doesn't matter. But what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide the top, front, and right. And then with my view cube right here, I'm going to click on the top. So now I have my sketch. It's looking good. It is ready to go. Okay, so your very first step is going to be grabbing the circle tool. I'm going to use the center point circle. So click on the center point circle. Make sure you click on the origin, right? That'll help you out later on. And I'm just going to make something random. I'm going to make a 5-inch circle. And again, for those of you guys who are new to Onshape, it can be tempting to click around, and it's kind of funny to say, but you don't want to click too much. You want to click as little as possible in Onshape, because sometimes you lose some of the abilities to change things. And so I'm going to click again on the center point circle. I'm going to talk about this click by click just so you guys get it. I'm going to click once on the center point. I'm going to drag this out, and then I'm going to click one more time. But I actually don't need to click on that box that says 5.587 to change it. I can just type 5. So now I have a 5-inch circle. And now I could totally do that with a dimension tool. I could change it later, obviously. But I just want to remind you guys that sometimes you want to be careful about what you're clicking on. Okay, so the next step is going to be creating a smaller circle. So I'm going to create a smaller circle right here, plus some extra geometry. And then we're going to create a circular pattern and then extrude out of that pattern. So let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to create another circle. Now what I want to do is I want to start at the midpoint and make sure I'm on the midpoint. That's super important. So make sure I'm on the midpoint right here, and that I have also made contact with the outside circle. And so I'm going to make this 1/4 inch, right? And obviously the size of your circle has a huge impact of how many teeth you're going to have for your gear. And so you can go into way further detail about calculating the correct pitch and how many teeth you need, because obviously that's a really important feature. But I'm not going to cover that in this video. I just want to show you guys what I found is a really easy way to make these gears. Now at this point, I could just create a circular pattern of this circle, and it would make like a sprocket shape, but I want to go for more of a gear. So I'm going to create some extra geometry. And so what I found a great way to do is to use the 3-point arc tool. And so if you look at your smaller circle, I would go like halfway in between the middle and bottom, but over towards the side here. And so I'm going to click right about here. It doesn't really matter. And so you want to make sure that you go towards both lines, and then you can pick the radius, right? So I'm going to go with something like this. That's fine. All right, so now I've got a more smooth kind of transition. And so when these gears, they mesh together, it'll be a more uniform shape. Okay, so now at this point, I have a couple of options. I could try to create an arc on the other side, but I want to make sure that this is perfect. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a line on the center circle of this small circle, and I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm going to make sure this is perfectly perpendicular. And I'm actually going to use this as an axis for a mirror, so that way I can tell that it's perfect. And so I'm going to click on my little arc, and then up here I have the mirror tool. Click on the mirror tool, it's going to tell me in that blue box to select my mirror line, and then boom, I have my perfect mirrored arc. And so that way I know they're the same, I know it's uniform, and I am good to go. All right, so at this point we have our geometry, and what we want to do is we want to make a circular pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the pattern tool. So by default you're going to see the linear pattern tool, and if you hit this button down, you'll go to the circular pattern tool. So that's what we want right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this arc, hold shift, click on the circle, hold shift, click on that arc, and then go to the circular pattern tool. And so what's really cool is this creates this automatically. So you see by default I have 3. You may want to make sure that you're still making contact with the outside line, because you can drag your center point of this circular pattern away from the center of the circle. And in some cases I've seen that it can be off just a little bit. Right now it looks like it's perfect, so I'm going to leave it alone. But this is really important. Do you see how I have a check mark on my mouse? So, you know, a lot of people, what they want to do is they want to change the number of instances right here. And what I've found is that if you go to like 10, right? 10 is fine. But obviously I want way more than 10. But if I go to like 30, it doesn't work. Now, somebody who knows this software maybe a little bit more extensively than I do could tell me why that's broken. But obviously, when I first saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And so what I've found the easiest way to do, the easiest thing to do is to make sure that you click first before you try to increase the number of entities of that pattern. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to make my circular pattern, and then I'm going to click. So now I have my pattern, and so now I can absolutely make more than just 10. So I've got 30, and this would be a pretty wide tooth gear, and so I'm going to try 40. Here we go. Okay, so they're not connected yet, but I've got a pretty good looking gear here. I'm going to say that looks pretty good, and so my next step, I'm going to click on the inside of this gear that I just made, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude it out. So I've got my gear shape here. It's looking pretty good. Now this is super wide. I actually don't want a 1-inch gear. I'm gonna go with 0.25, quarter inch. Okay, so I have something that is gear shaped. That being said, this doesn't really look like a gear that you would manufacture, and so we're going to take a few steps right now and make this look a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a sketch on this top face of my object. And this is one thing that I really love about these kinds of programs is that you don't need to actually sketch on a plane and then offset the plane. You can sketch directly on a face. And it's kind of helpful. So I'm going to create a sketch on this face right here. And again, I'm going to click my view cube to get a good view. And I'm going to go back to my center point circle tool. And so I'm going to make sure that I start from that midpoint, so that way it's nice and even. And I'm just going to put a little bit of a lip on here. And then I'm going to, well, here we go. We'll do like 0.75. And also, I'm not going to bother modeling the other side of the gear. I think if you were trying to 3D print this or get this manufactured, you probably would want to model the other side, but just because it's the exact same step, I'm not going to worry about it right now. Okay, so now I'm going to click on my donut, and I'm going to extrude again. Although this time, I don't want to extrude out, I want to remove. So I'm going to remove some material, and then obviously I don't want to go for a whole inch. That's way too much. And so I'm going to go with 0.1. So I've got a little bit of a lip here, right? So it's looking good, looking more like an actual gear. Now, oftentimes you'll see things like circle patterns inside of gears. You can attach things offset, and you could totally do that. So you would just create a sketch and create some circles. In fact, I've had my students do that in the past. Right now, I'm not going to worry about it for this demo because it's pretty easy to do. But I do need a hole right here. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create one more sketch on this face right here. And I'm going to draw a circle. Now in this case, I'm going to make this a 1/2 inch. You can make this whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. And so I'm going to select this face and I'm going to do one last extrude. And I'm going to remove. And again, I don't really care how much it removes. So I went with 1 inch. Obviously, you could change that if you want. But now I have a solid looking gear shape. All right. So now that I have my gear, now this is really important. I'm going to show you guys how to create an assembly and how to make the Revolute constraint, so that way this can spin around an axis. And whenever you do that, you've got to make sure that it has something to spin around. So whenever you're doing the assemblies, you can't tell something just to spin in space. You have to have another object for it to spin around. And so using the Revolute constraint is going to be key to setting up the gear relation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a bearing. And now this is really cool. Within Onshape right here, you can actually create a secondary part studio, because right now I'm in part studio 1. You can create a secondary part studio that's still within the same file. And so it's this little plus sign right here. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new part studio. And I'm going to create a sketch. So I'm going to create a sketch on the top plane. Then I'm going to hide my top, front, and right because I don't really need them. And now all I'm going to do is make a super, super simple bearing. And so I'm going to start off and I'm going to make this guy like 0.6. If you remember, the outside of the inner part of our bearing was like 0.75, and the interior hole was 1/2 inch, so 0.5. And so 0.6, really I'm just picking something random. So it's kind of in between those two values. Okay, so here I have my sketch, and I'm going to extrude. Again, I don't want to go a whole inch. That's kind of crazy. So I'm going to go with 0.1. Awesome. And now, just like our other example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sketch on this face. And I'm going to create a circle. And now this time, I want to make this the size of the hole that I had for my actual gear. And so I have, actually 0.483, that's pretty good. So you would want to make this about a 1/2 inch. Now, in reality, if you're having this manufactured or you're 3D printing this, I would make it slightly smaller than an actual 1/2 inch, so like 0.48, 0.49. I'm actually going to leave it at 0.483 because that looks pretty good to me. And so I'm going to extrude this out. But now, obviously, I don't want to go an inch. I want to go the depth or the the thickness of my gear. And so I'm going to go with a 1/4 inch. And again, I would probably make this like 0.26 in the real world because you want to have a little bit of a tolerance and things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it right here. Finally, I'm going to create a sketch on this new face. And I'm going to make this 0.6 so it matches my other circle. And again, it kind of looks like it disappeared, but it's still there, right? And I'm going to go ahead and hit extrude. And I'm going to make this 0.1, just like before. Awesome. Okay, now I want to make this look a little bit more professional, just kind of for the heck of it. And so I'm actually going to click on a fillet right here. And I'm going to fillet the top and the bottom. This step is not necessary, not at all. But I just thought it'd make it look a little bit better. So now the fillet created this circle right here. You could also sketch a circle if you wanted to. But lastly, I'm going to extrude and just remove this right here. Bearings have holes in the middle in the real world. So I'm going to go ahead and, make that happen here. Okay, so awesome. I have my bearing. Again, this is super, super simple. You probably want to spend some more time, finding a bearing in the real world. and making sure that your sizes are all correct. But for the purposes of this will do what we need. Okay, so now I have two part studios. I have my main gear, I have my main bearing, and I'm gonna go now over to my assembly. All right, so when you click on assembly, the assembly tab is always at the bottom of your Onshape document, no matter what. And there's nothing here. We're given an origin, we have a different set of tools, but that's pretty much it. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're going to insert, right? So first I want to insert some things. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the insert tab, and sure enough, automatically I have my my gear and I have my bearing. So I'm going to click once, and then it populates that gear. And so I'm actually going to drag this guy away just a little bit. Click once, drag. Okay, I'm going to put him over here. It doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to do the same with my bearing. Okay, so now what I'm going to show you guys next, there are definitely a few different ways to do this. Now I'm going to show you a way that I found was super helpful, and I have a few extra steps, and so you could probably do this in fewer steps, but I'll explain why when we get to it. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit that check mark on this right here. Okay, so right now I need to have my bearing fixed in place in order to have this spin around it. And so there are two ways to do it. One is you could right click on this and hit fix. That way this can't move. Now that's actually not the way I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do that for a few reasons here. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and hit unfix, and I'm going to actually use a Fasten Mate. So the Fasten Mate. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten this gear to my origin. That way that everything is always going to be centered around your origin, which is good practice in general. But you're going to see that later on, it's going to be helpful as well to have these mates here in place. So that way we can make things super, super accurate. Okay, so I'm going to use the Fasten Mate. So I'm going to click on the Fasten Mate, and that needs two things. So these little blue, red, green lines, these are mate connectors. And so it shows various axes you can pick and objects you can pick, right? So here in my cylinder, I can pick the top of the cylinder, the middle of the cylinder, the bottom of the cylinder, whatever. And so I'm going to click on the middle of the cylinder, and I'm going to click on the Z axis. So if you look at your view cube, the blue axis is your Z right here. And then I'm going to click on the blue Z axis right here. And sure enough, okay, so now my bearing is I have the Fasten Mate to the origin, so that guy is not going to move. And so the Revolute is super, super easy. And so the Revolut Mate is right here. And so all I need to do is select the edges that I want connected. And so I'm going to click on the Revolut Mate, and I need two objects. And so I'm going to first click this inside edge right here. It's the inside edge of the top of my bearing, and I'm going to select the inside edge that I would want it to connect to. I'm going to hit click, and it's done. So here I have my Revolute, and you can see my gear is spinning. It's not going anywhere, and we have that taken care of. Okay. So here's something else I want to show you guys. Now, there are a few different ways to do what I'm about to do next. So I wanted to show you guys how to use the gear relation, because it's really cool. So you can have one gear spinning at the same time when you move a different gear. I mean, because that's how it works in the real world, right? So this last part of this demo is going to be that gear relation. So in essence, the gear relation is super easy. All you need to do is click on two Revolutes, and it will bind them together. So when you spin one, it'll spin the other. That being said, you have to make sure that the second gear is fastened in place. And so there are, again, a few different ways you could do this. So I'm going to go to Insert one more time. And I'm going to go to the Part Studio, right? I'm going to get myself another gear. I'm sorry, another bearing. And then I'm going to get myself another gear right here. And so I'm going to want to put these in place. And so right now, you can see that things are really far off, right? So it's going to take a second here to get these things into place. And so I would first maybe get these things settled on the Z axis. So a little more. And again, I could use these numbers to make this a little more accurate, right? So let me see, 6.5. That looks pretty good. Be like 6.3. That looks pretty good. Okay, so I've got that settled, right? Now, I don't know how I'm doing from the right side or the back side. Let's see. Okay. And again, it's going to take a second to line this stuff up here. All right, so if I go on the right side, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to also use this right side, and I'm going to move this guy over. So I'm going to click on this guy. I want to match these up. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, we're looking pretty good. And so I would argue that we probably need to space this guy out a little bit more. All right, so let's start to get our gear into place. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this guy. Okay, that looks pretty good. From that angle, at least. Okay. So I've got my top view. Maybe I'm going to move this a little bit more. 0.25. I'm getting a little nitpicky here. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. And then now, obviously, I look good from the top view, but from the bottom view, things are not the same. All right, that being said, I'm actually going to try to go ahead and do this Revolute because I know this is actually in place. And all I need to do is select these things. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do this Revolut Mate again. And this is going to be kind of tricky. Okay, so I'm going to select this edge. Select this edge. Oh, look at that. It went down. I was kind of hoping it went up. Okay, so no big deal. So if you see right now, my Revolute worked, right? This thing can spin. But the problem is I can still spin in the, I can still move this object. And so it's not actually going to spin for me. And so what I want to do now is I want to move these in the right direction. And then I'm going to see if I can't fix. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm gonna right click, fix. Sure enough, I've got my gear. Okay. And so what I've found, right, is I'm gonna go ahead and go right here. And so this gear relation is actually super easy. So I'm gonna click on the gear relation, and I'm gonna click on this Revolute and this Revolute. Hit check mark. Actually here, I wanna show you this. So the gear ratio, right? These gears are the same size, so obviously they need to spin in the same direction. So I'm going 1-to-1. But what's really cool is you can actually model compound gear ratios and things like that using this tool by changing that gear ratio. So it's really cool. And so now if you look, as I spin this gear, it spins the other gear, and we have the gear relation. So it's really cool. And so I mentioned another method. Sometimes what I like to do is I'll fix this with the Fasten Mate, and it'll make the two together, but I use an offset. So if you use the Fasten Mate, you can actually offset it by 5 inches in the X direction, and then you can make that spacing that way. It really doesn't matter which way you do, but here you see it's actually pretty easy. So again, I hope this was helpful. Now you could 3D print this stuff and you can model this, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with these mates in assemblies. And so again, if you were trying to manufacture this gear, you could 3D print this out. Also too, if you wanted to just take this sketch, right, you can totally export sketches as a DXF, which is awesome. So like I use my X-Carve CNC all the time, and so it's really awesome that you could take individual sketches and export as DXFs. I'm not going to get in that right now, but I can drop that DXF straight into my CAM software and cut these out on my router. Obviously, I don't do the Z and things like that, but you totally could. And so there's a lot of stuff you could do with this. So I hope this was a good tutorial. I hope this helps you guys out, whether you're in my classroom or some other, engineer all around the world or maker. And so thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you all have a great day and are staying safe out there. Until next time, have a great day.